My old summer camp counselor. Some background. I'm a 22-year-old college senior about to grade 8 and start medical school in the fall. This happened when I was in elementary school, so over a decade ago. Over the summer way back then, my mom sent me to YMCA summer camp. I enjoyed going in every day and hanging out with all my friends from school who also went to the camp, but I especially loved one of the counselors, Mike. Mike was always sitting in the same spot when I got dropped off in the morning, and he would see me walk in and put a huge smile on his face. We would always sit there and play cards or some other board game in the morning while all the kids were arriving. Once the day's scheduled activities started, Mike would always be the counselor in charge of my group. He would always be just close to me. As a kid, I didn't know that was weird. I really liked him, as I said, as I thought he was a really cool guy as an 8-year-old. Fast forward a couple years, I don't remember the exact timeframe/timeline, I'm sorry. My mom, my younger sister, and I were out at a state park in the area, about half an hour from where we lived. We had just gone down there to hang out for the day. We have a great time on the playground, walking around the trails, etc., and then we head back to the car. When we arrive back at the car, my mom was getting my sister all strapped in and ready for the ride home, and I was getting situated in the back seat as well. Now our car was in the parking lot, obviously, and there really weren't tons of people at the park that day. The lot was pretty much empty. So when I noticed that there was a car parked right next to our car, I was like, that's weird, but again, I was a kid and didn't really think anything of it. Why would this car park literally right next to us when I can see 50 empty spots from right here? Anyways, my mom is getting my sister and I all ready for the trip back home, as I said. Suddenly the driver door of the other car opens and out pops Mike. My mom recognized him, so she just said, "Hi," and continued back to what she was doing. Mike says, "Do you mind if I take a couple pictures of I_am_a_grocery_bag? He's gotten so grown and I want to remember this." My mom obviously goes, "No, you're not going to do that," and shuts the driver's door and locks the car, and we leave. As we're leaving, I can see Mike trying to take a photo like through the windows of the car. A couple years later, when I was a bit older, my mom told me more details about Mike. My mom at the time was pretty high up in a company that pairs kids with adult mentors. Adults would apply to be paired with a kid. So my mom starts telling me about how one day they were going through the applications to be a mentor and Mike's name popped up. Apparently someone else had interviewed Mike and recommended him for approval into the system. My mom, on the other hand, essentially vetoed it because she obviously had known Mike from these other experiences and she got a weird vibe from him that something was off with him. So finally, we're watching the news at dinner one day a bit later. They start sharing a story about a man who was arrested, and they show the mugshot of the man. Mike. The charge? Thousands of images and videos of child porn that he both had made and was just in possession of. He actually was caught by Border Patrol, as he was acting weird when he was trying to cross into Canada, and they decided to search his car and they found a bunch of it on his computer. They alerted US authorities, who then searched his house and they found a ton more of it. I am 100% confident that he wanted to add me to the collection. If not for my mom having a great mother's instinct and the Canada-US border, it might have happened. Summer camp counselor Mike, let's not cross paths again. My camp counselor was insane. First of all, let's preface by saying this was in the very early 90s, and as we all know, it was a very different world those days, and I was pretty naive for a kid. Also, I had kind of a fucked up childhood, so this was not the worst of things to happen by far, and therefore I pretty much brushed it off. When I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, I would visit the boys' club a lot, which was pretty big back then, and my parents thought that sending me to boys' club camp for the summer only made sense. The camp was not an overnight type deal, but featured all of the normal things you would expect, like a lake, arts and crafts area, crappy school-style lunches. I did the normal camp things like found a girlfriend and getting into trouble. The camp was run by counselors, which I can only assume were in their 20s to 30s. When you're 12, every seems old, and as you would expect, they would come up with very interesting punishments for kids, like being forced to carry a huge wooden totem pole in circles in a hot field for some time. I never actually had this punishment, but I remember one of the older kids doing it. or just straight up punching you in your chest and knocking the wind out of you, which I did experience. One of the counselors that I had this experience with was named TJ, and he was a very large, well-built guy in his 20s. One day I did something wrong and got sent to the lunch area for essentially detention. The area was actually a large concrete floor with a wooden roof attached to a cabin that contained the kitchen. It was basically a school lunch setup where you would come up and choose chocolate milk or orange juice and get served a crappy turkey sandwich, a pack of mayo, and one of those amazing brownies. When I get there, I notice there are about 4 or 5 kids already sitting at benches, and TJ is in the front of everyone by the lunch serving area pacing and saying something. I sit down and don't really remember what happened until things started to get weird. TJ pulled out a knife and got an apple. He started skinning and stabbing it and saying stuff like, "This is what I'll do to you if you get in trouble again," and other things of that nature. At this time I honestly did not feel scared in any way due to my tendency to completely shut down when shit gets bad, but I did remember feeling very creeped out and that he was trying very hard to be threatening. The younger kids, especially a little girl who was maybe 8 or so, was freaking out crying. The next thing I remember is him telling her to follow him into the kitchen. I then heard lots of screaming and crying coming from the back of the kitchen. After a while he came back with her, and her face was streamed with tears. I remember it vividly. He then looked at me and another boy and told us to follow him as he escorted us to a huge walk-in refrigerator and brought us inside. He said, "I want you both to start screaming and acting like I'm killing you in here. If you don't make the other kids scared, I'll kill you for real." We did as he asked, and when he closed the door we started screaming and wailing. At this point I honestly thought it was kind of funny because I rationalized that the little girl was told the same thing. Anyways, after 5 maybe 10 minutes he let us out and told us to go back to our benches. Again, I don't remember anything after this, just kind of a blank. I remember when I got home that night from camp telling my mom about it, and I remember she called somebody and I think that guy got fired. I don't remember ever seeing him again, and my parents never sent me back. I never really thought about it much growing up, but as the years have gone by and I look back to things that I shrugged off as normal, I see they were anything but that. Creepy camp counselor. Names have been changed, so at 16 I was too old to attend my traditional Christian camp as a camper. I had been going since I was about 10. So I opted to be a counselor. I underwent training, and during the summer I showed up for a week as a counselor. The girls were great. Had fun with them, but the trouble started the night before the week's start when the counselors all met and had a night to ourselves. I guess I give off this naive air because a few people took me under their wing. An older counselor, Sam, M30-ish, warned against friending another guy, Paul, M25. Paul was fun and played along with me. At one point lifted me off of my feet from behind. I thought it was fun and brushed it off, only he kept giving me too much attention. Gradually I got more alarmed. In crafts he tried spending time with me despite needing to focus on his own kids. Then I noticed he wasn't with his kids at all at times. Long story short, there is a schedule, so cabin 12 as an example is with a few other cabins swimming at the pool at 1 p.m, where cabin 3 is at the lake swimming same time. He's supposed to be at the lake with his boys, but instead by the canteen, snack station, watching me. I've seen him, he knows I have, but is content to stare at me across the way. I bottle it all up. This week isn't about drama, it's about the campers. Plus I never have to see him again after this week. Sam steps in between me and Paul when he can, but not always can, seeing as our schedule doesn't always meet. Middle of the week Paul gets taken away from his cabin, replaced, and put in kitchen duty. Apparently he's been too friendly with the kids. At one point putting a girl in his lap and staring at her. Just freaking staring at her. That and not being with his cabin at all. Now I didn't see him as frequently, so when nope, during the end of week talent show he decides he would sign up. He gets up there and states he's going to show us this dance. A 2-person dance, like a tango or waltz, I don't recall. Then says, "Can I have Boy and Pesky join me up front?" My campers grin, think it's funny, and start chanting my name. But luckily there was a girl who shared my name, so most eyes went on her instead. Gave me time to slip out. Honestly could have handled that situation better, but I was not only freaked out but mortified. About 30 minutes later the number 2 at the camp found me in tears. Asked me why I ran off. I explained everything and she didn't second-guess me. He had already raised so many flags by being off with the kids that he wasn't going to be invited back ever. If I ever have doubts of his creepiness, I have a picture of the camp counselors to look back to, taken the beginning of the week. We're all standing smiling at the camera and he's got his hand on my head staring at me. Yeah, let's not meet again. Summer camp in the South. This experience still gives me chills to this day. I actually have a few other camp encounters that I can share if anyone is interested, mainly occurring along the with campers. North GA is a mighty interesting place. A few years ago, I worked at a Jewish summer camp in North Georgia. As many of you might know, Georgia is a fairly conservative state as well as being predominantly Christian. There are small Jewish communities and a few summer camps. I'd say this camp was more culturally Jewish than it was religious. There were no religious requirements nor religion-specific focus. Rather, it was a place for kids who were often in the minority to come to a camp that allowed them to meet some other kids like them. Staff came from all over. We had many Australians, lots of Brits, a few Israelis, and people from various areas of the USA. Each night at around 10, most of the staff was able to go out on the town for a couple of hours. Enough staff remained behind to watch over the cabins. We rotated. This particular night, a group of about 5 of us decided to go to a local bar to grab a few beers. It had been a hot day and was a humid night, so we decided to sit outside on the patio. For some backstory on the town, generally we were extremely well received by the community, despite differences. We brought in lots of revenue for the town during the summer. We bought supplies at the local Walmart and often took the campers on tubing trips or occasionally out to dinner after a long hike on the Appalachian Trail. It was midsummer, so we'd been out to the bars in the area many times already that session. The 5 of us sat around a table, drinking and discussing the events of the day, as fellow employees typically would after work. About 30 minutes in, a white man in his 20s came up to our table. I distinctly remember a jagged scar on his cheek but didn't think much of it at the time. He introduced himself, then told us that he was having a party that night at his place. Anyone can come, he said. Black, white, gay, straight. I found it odd that he'd open his speech with that disclaimer. Of course the party should be open to everyone. Why did he feel the need to specify? But we'd all had a few beers and were feeling pretty loose. He talked for a bit longer, and nothing really seemed off. We told him we were working at a camp in the area and couldn't stay out, so we'd probably be heading back soon. An hour later, our group went out to the parking lot to get into the car. As we approached it, we saw the same guy come out of the shadows. He had a buddy with him with a shaved head. His expression was incredibly hateful. His eyes had changed. He pounded his fist into his hand, then took off his shirt and revealed a poorly inked SS tattoo. My stomach dropped. One of the bigger guys in my group, Kevin, immediately reacted by pulling a knife out of his back pocket. At summer camp most of us staff carried knives. We spent a lot of time building campfires, etc., and asked what they wanted. The original guy started shouting some anti-Semitic remarks and told us he was going to beat us down. Kevin started walking toward the 2 guys, but we pulled him back. He told us his buddies were on the way. Sure enough, some more guys started walking into the parking lot. It's all kind of blurry here. I remember jumping into one of the cars, pulling Kevin with us. It felt like we were surrounded, though there were probably only 7 or 8 of them. Rocks were thrown at the car. We sped off. My heart was beating like crazy. We never went back to that bar. A summer camp gave us nightmares. This story takes place 5 years ago. At that time I was 14 and was a Boy Scout since I was 11. Sorry if it feels weird, but I try to remember it and tell it as best as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Anyways, it was on summer holidays and we are usually 2 weeks in the wild and doing scout stuff. We get to know other scout groups from other parts of the country. It's generally a super good time to meet new people. This time we met with 3 other groups and we'll spend 3 weeks together. For the record, I was with the 2 other guys of my group and we shared the tent together. The days go on and one of my friends has a crush on a girl. One day he invites her to our tent on the evening to have some fun playing cards and tell jokes. She agreed. On that evening she sneaked up to our tent and came with a friend of hers. Now let me introduce you to Mia. Anyways, we had a good time during the night and a couple hours later they both left. During the time at the camp, a good friend of mine, Lisa, had a crush on Mia who was also into her. It was a happy moment for everyone. The days go on and Mia gets a little weird and talks alone to people who aren't in the camp. As the time goes on, rumors say that Mia tried to commit suicide in the forest. A kid saw her trying to strangle herself with her belt, after what they alerted the adults, and she was going to get picked up by her parents a couple days later. She was gone for a couple days and everything went back to normal. Little did we know that Mia was back in the camp as other younglings saw her in the forest, saying things in the likes of, "I wanna see Lisa," whilst holding a knife. At that moment everybody was scared as shit. The adults decided to dress up a big tent, it the English name, and put us all inside whilst we wait for Mia to show up. Eventually she showed up, saw us and ran straight towards us with her knife in a hand. It happened so quickly but I still remember it. One of the adults managed to tackle her down and made sure that she wouldn't get up by holding her tight. Another adult made sure to pick her knife and called for the police and the parents. The story is nearly to an end as the police took Mia, followed by her parents, and it was the last time I saw her. Since then I only heard once from her. I heard she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and she's in a clinic with people there to help her. Lisa is still traumatized of these events. One thing that bums her is that her name is one letter apart from Mia's name. People sometimes mispronounce it and it makes her recall these events. So, Mia, I doubt you'll ever read this. Maybe someone who has lived this will come across this post, but once again I doubt it. So, Mia, let's not meet.